I don't know about you, but it's been an incredibly interesting Lent for us as a church community. An interesting Lent as many of us have shared in house groups around the city to think about the mystery and the mercy of God. The mystery and the mercy of the journey that Jesus spent here on earth of encountering God in his own life. We've been discovering not only the humanity of Jesus, but also the divinity of Jesus. And we've been experiencing and sharing together what that humanity looked like, knowing that much of what Jesus shared in his own life was a humanity that we also share in the here and now. Isn't it great that we have a God who shares our journey? It's not a God who's distant, not a God who's way up there and out of touch, but a God who is definitely Emmanuel, who is with us. A God who journeys with us in our lives and in our suffering and in our pain and in our joys. It is that God that we see in Jesus, and that is the wonderful experience that we get to see of the mystery of Jesus. The very beginning of our Lenten experience, we talked about how when Jesus was led from that wonderful experience of his own baptism, to be led into the desert, to that place where he would be tempted by the evil one, and how Jesus resisted that temptation. And yet, even in that resistance of temptation, we saw how Jesus related to our own humanity, how we too are tempted over and over again. We looked at how in that experience, not only was Jesus able to conquer that temptation, but how we, filled with the Holy Spirit, are also able to resist the temptations of life and to find a way, find a higher way of living that enables us to be with Jesus on that mountaintop as well as in that valley. We experienced the born of the Spirit and how Jesus encountered that spiritual impact on his own life and in his own body that transformed him. It was that experience of baptism that transformed him. It was the experience of baptism that opened up the new way of ministry and of life. And in that baptism, his own experience of baptism, that enabled him to encounter the spiritual realm that you and I are invited into even on this Resurrection Sunday. A reminder that we don't live on our own, but rather that we live with the power of Spirit within us. And it is in that power of Spirit that we are then able to glimpse the divinity of Christ. The transformation of Jesus is an example for us about how our lives too can be transformed. And throughout this experience of Lent, that's what we've been sharing together, the transformation of life. That we are people who are worthy, are people who are grace-filled, are people who live with the abundance of God within our lives. We're no longer a people who are on the scum of the earth, but rather we are people who have been lifted up and lifted to a higher cause, lifted to a higher truth, lifted to a place where we can encounter the presence of God in our everyday living experiences. And that's what's been so wonderful about this Lenten journey of entering into the mystery of God. You know, sometimes we don't want to be involved in the mystery of God because it all seems so mysterious. That's why we have the mystery of our faith. You know, with that kind of blind faith experience. And yet, in my experience, the more we enter into the mystery of our faith, the more we get to see God. The more we enter into the mystery, the more we get to see the awesomeness of the God in which we worship. The more that we experience that God's grace abounds for each and every one of us, the more that we get to experience that living in community and living as the people of God is the way to live. That transforming experience of who God is enables us today to come to celebrate Resurrection Sunday. Now, I know that there is great theological debate amongst many, many peoples about what did the resurrection really mean. Was it a physical resurrection? Was it a spiritual resurrection? Was it that Jesus' body was stolen, or did Jesus really physically rise from the dead? And I'll leave that theological debate to your own psyche and to your own experience, because for me, I will be honest, I believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ. I truly believe that Jesus rose from the dead, that he came out of that tomb and experienced the disciples in those following days of his own journey before ascending into heaven, from whence the Holy Spirit came and gave birth to the church. That's my belief. That's how I see the Jesus the Christ. But whether you experience that or not, whether that's a part of your theology or not, is not so important to me today. What's important to me today is that when we come to experience this Easter Sunday, this Resurrection Sunday, is that we come to experience our spiritual resurrection that we get to encounter with Jesus Christ today. It's no longer a question about whether the physical body rose, it's whether our bodies are going to rise again on this Easter Sunday morning. Whether we are going to experience transformation this morning. Whether we are going to journey with Jesus in our own resurrection so that we might choose to live life today rather than be buried in the tomb that Jesus was buried on Good Friday. Are we really going to experience our own personal resurrections this morning so that we can choose life today and choose to live it in the abundance of God's grace, in the abundance of what God offers us on this Easter Sunday morning? Because I truly believe that the whole message of resurrection is one of transformation, is of turning our lives upside down, is changing our focus, is about enabling us to encounter the divinity of Christ within our own bodies, the risen Christ in our own bodies. It's been incredible to watch the transformation of people's lives, especially in these last few weeks or so. And to hear those stories as I've connected with the church office while I've been at home. And listening continually to the house groups that have been meeting around the city about how people have been experiencing their own transformation in this journey toward Easter and in this journey of Lent. Some of you might be wondering what on earth this cross is doing on the altar this morning. And we've been, during the beginnings of this worship experience, you've been seeing folks come up and take the stuff that was written on the front and show you the transformation of what truly happens when we encounter the living Christ. On Good Friday, this is where our cross was put up here. And on Good Friday, we took the opportunity to, some of our house groups from around the city, talked about something in their own lives from that group or from one individual within that group, and told their story about what their life was like without Jesus, about what their life was like pre-knowing God within their own lives. And they talked about how different their life was then to how their life is now. And we used that as part of our Good Friday meditations, and members of our congregation were also given the opportunity on pieces of cardboard to also write on there the pain of the journey that many of us encounter in this world. The pain of loneliness, the pain of oppression, the pain of suffering, the pain of rejection. All of those experiences that we get in our own humanity. On Good Friday, we were given the opportunity to bring to church and to bring to this cross. And what a joy it's been today to see the transformation of some of those stories that have been upon this cross this morning. Some of those stories about how the risen Christ, the impact of Christ risen, has changed their perceptions on life. You know, sometimes I think that our world is hungry for a change in the way that we live. It's hungry for the way in which we perceive our own relationship with God and our own relationship with one another. I truly believe that people are looking for a higher way of living, a better way of living, a different way of living, a way that is conscious about the Christ who lives within us.